streamlining your processes by challenging the status quo. Hello and welcome to today's Steelo podcast, where I'll be sharing with you my experiences with a very specific process that is basically the norm within the steel industry, and it was something that we decided to challenge. The process is basically down to carrying out a site survey. So in the steel industry, most of our work is a steel frame or steel structure within a residential development. And when someone needs to extend their house or build a basement or do a loft conversion, they need steel. And the way the industry always worked was basically to go out on site and, as the steel, let's say, specialists, do the site survey. Now, the problem with that is that our customers saw us as the steel masters, steel specialists. Therefore, they relied on us to provide all the answers. And unfortunately, as much as we would like to, there are some decisions that are totally outside of the scope of our work. An example will be whether you need a steel beam which is within the floor to be flush with the ceiling, or so that the top doesn't go above the finished floor level of the floor above, therefore flush with the floor level above, but then most probably sort of sticking out below through the ceiling. Now, when we used to go to site and ask the question, look, this beam is deeper than the thickness of your floor, do you want the top to be flush and not stick above, or below to hang below? And the answer was quite often, well, you, the steel guys, you should know. And from an engineering perspective, and especially from a fabrication perspective, it really doesn't matter where we put that beam, because it would be a matter of just drilling the holes 50 mil high or lower, or basically supplying a column that is 50 mil taller or shorter. So we didn't care, but the difference was for the customer, our customer, not the end homeowner, but for the customer, because if the beam sticks out above the floor level on the floor above, I mean, I think that is far from being perfect, so that's definitely not something they want, or below. Now, with being below, there are still two options. One is having the beam inside the floor, which means that in order to do that, you need to trim all the floor joists, put the beam in between, and then somehow reinforce the joists that were cut. Or the most easiest solution is to basically put the beam under the floor joist, support it from below, and job done. But obviously with the last solution, the problem is that you then have a beam below the ceiling level, so you'd have to box it up, and then you have this sort of box protruding below the ceiling. And like I said, from our perspective, it really didn't matter, and from a structural engineer's perspective, again, nothing changes because the loadings are exactly the same. So this always used to be the case, where you go on site and do the site surveys. But when you look at it from a business perspective, and in a business where you're looking at improving the processes and looking at efficiencies, at streamlining operations, then you pick the most awkward sort of parts of the process. And with site surveys, even though we used to charge for them, and as far as I remember, it used to be £100 for a site survey, which sounds like a lot, but when you think about it, you basically have an engineer out on site for at least half a day, if you take into account the commute there and back, and quite often the full day if it's far away and it's quite a big site that requires 2-3 hours on site. So we still charged £100, whereas in the same time, the engineer in the office, they can do 3, maybe 4, if not 5 projects, which gives us a few hundred, if not a few £1,000s coming into the business. So it was on a totally different level in terms of the return on investment on time of the engineers. So the £100 we were charging just basically was a waste of our time and resources. And I know it's horrible to talk about £100 as being a waste of time, but unfortunately in this case it was true. So the conclusion was quite straightforward. We basically need to stop doing site surveys. But how can you design a steel structure without doing a site survey? In our world, quotes or the drawings we receive for quotes are just a rough indication of what steel is needed where, but it is not enough to fabricate the steels down to 1 millimeter. So that is why you need the site survey to then iron out all the details and then be able to manufacture the steel accordingly. So if we were to take out site surveys, the big question is, how do we get the information? So I'll leave this question for now, because in parallel to the issue of sending engineers to site, there was the issue of lead times. So in the past, the way we used to operate was basically provide a quote based on these rough drawings that we received, most often architect's drawings, and then we received a deposit payment to basically convert the project into a live project. The problem though was that we didn't have enough information, i.e. the dimensions, to actually design the steelwork and then fabricate it. So we received an order on day one, and the lead times back then were around 3 weeks. So if today is the 1st of a month, and it actually is, then let's say we're aiming for the 21st of this month. So the customer has the 21st on their mind, which is fine. We also know that we've agreed the 21st, and then the days go by. We then start reaching out to the customer saying, look, we need to get some more information and I'll probably arrange for the site survey, and then there was a bit of pushback because the customer would say quite often that the site is not ready, so please come, call next week to arrange the site survey in the next few days. Which basically meant that we were losing the days in the run-up to the delivery date, whereas everyone, and predominantly the customer, had the 21st in their mind as the delivery date. We obviously notified them initially saying that, well, we would need all the information a few days before the delivery, but that didn't really work because in their mind they had the 21st, and they would then fire back saying, well, I've paid you the deposit to almost like guarantee a delivery on the 21st. And even though, like I said, we did make it clear, it was really a struggle. They had in their mind that date and that's it. So we were basically working on two difficult, not assumptions, but the basis where, first of all, site surveys were needed, and secondly, the lead times were long because we were waiting for enough information so that we can actually deliver on the already extended lead times. And I knew that this is something that just won't work in the long run and will definitely not allow us to scale up. So after doing some thinking and analysis, realized that the best way forward would be to, first of all, trim the lead time from 3 weeks down to 3, maybe 5 days. But it would be impossible for us to do these site surveys, so it would have to be the customer that provides the dimensions. Now, this was a tall order because this was totally unacceptable in the past. It was definitely challenging the status quo. It was something that I personally was so afraid of that we've ordered 50 magnetic drills, and we created these kind of sets with some cutters and some coolant and a brush, and we were ready to hand out these sets for free to anyone that was objecting or pushing back on the idea of them providing us the dimensions. Now, as surprising as it sounds, we ended up in a situation where when we announced it to our customers, we made this big change saying, okay, we won't accept a deposit payment from you until 3-5 days before the delivery date, and only when you have all the details required, which effectively means that the site is ready to take off all the dimensions, therefore it will be ready to accept the steel work. So obviously from the outset it looks like we are making things more awkward for the customer, but when you actually stand back and look at the whole problem or the whole or how building sites operate, we actually ended up doing a favor to our customers because, and again, as surprising as it sounds, they don't really pay too much attention as to what actually needs to be done on site. And in the early days, I used to go to sites myself to do the site surveys, and it struck me that as the steel person, which bear in mind is only one of many materials required to the building site, after 5 minutes on site, I knew more about the site and what needs to be done than the owner of the building company. So I found it actually ridiculous that here I am only to measure up for the steelwork, whereas I'm actually guiding them through what they need to do. And I think the pivotal moment, or the moment that really stuck in my head, was when I went to site and the site manager showed me round where I need to measure for the steelwork, and that was, bear in mind, the bay window at the front. And I said to him, are you sure you need steelwork for the bay window? Because I've never come across a project where someone's removing the front wall. He said, no, 100%, it's over here. And he pointed me to the drawings. I'm like, look, I've got the same drawings in front of me, and clearly the steelwork is going to the back because you're building a rear extension. So there was this funny, awkward situation where there were like 2 or 3 other guys standing around us, and I was basically rotating the drawing in my hand by 180 degrees, proving to them that they've made a 180-degree mistake, that they were basically about to rip out the wrong wall. So that was definitely a moment that defined the need for change. So as you can see, there were many factors, and all of them were pointing in one direction. We are not able to promise delivery dates without knowing what needs to be done, but then also the customer won't know what they need 3 weeks before the delivery. So we had to delay the moment we took on the project and accepted a deposit. And it was quite funny because some customers were saying, well, why don't you want to take money off me? I'm here to pay and you don't want this money. And we had to explain to them, yes, exactly, that's right. It's because we've changed the way we work. We now don't accept blind deposits for a project that will somehow work out in the future. We are now waiting until you, the customer, knows exactly what you need, and then over the phone or by providing various scans or photos of drawings, we were able to get all the necessary dimensions to then detail the steelwork, therefore build a 3D model, and then generate fabrication drawings and order materials cut to length down to 1 millimeter. So going back to the mag drills, even though I was so frightened about introducing this step, as astonishing as it sounds, we found it difficult to actually push the mag drills out of the door. So many customers, the other part, not the ones complaining that we don't want to take their deposit, they were actually perfectly fine, saying, okay, fine, I'll come back to you when you need the dimensions. And the most surprising thing was that they were actually okay with providing the dimension. So we struggled to push out the mag drills, and we had to create or come up with some silly sort of competitions, like the best customer of the week, bang, we send a mag drill for free, or the largest beam ordered this week, bang, you get a free mag drill, because we were worried that they'll lay around forever in our sort of storage place. But then again, going back to my main point, by introducing this change, which again from a customer's perspective might seem like an awkward step or making their lives more difficult, and maybe us brushing off the responsibility for taking the dimensions incorrectly, but it actually forces the customers to get their heads around the project and understand what they need to do. So all in all, looking at it from like a global perspective, it didn't only benefit us, it also massively benefited the customers. And we are known for delivering at very short lead times. 4 to 6 working days is what we achieve, but that is only possible thanks to the fact that we get the dimensions from the customers, which means we have the green light to then crack on with the fulfillment. Now, it's funny that a few years after this change, I came across the theory of constraints by Eliyahu Goldratt, and he actually came up with the theory of constraints because he was shocked at how late projects were and why projects were delayed, because everyone knew what needs to be done, or at least at the outset people thought they knew what needs to be done, yet still, no matter what tools were being introduced, the Gantt charts and then various other planning tools, projects are known to be late. And he very quickly concluded that projects are late when there's not enough input information at the start of the project. So I remember when I read this, I was like, voila, this is exactly what we've experienced. Projects were late because we didn't know what we want to do, yet we already took the deposit from the customer, therefore converting this project into a live project. And as you can imagine, was a nightmare, chasing the customers and sort of having in the back of the mind the promised delivery date. It was just terrible. But now that has changed. It was obviously many years ago. We built the software around it. It incorporates the drum, which I explained in one of my other podcasts. But it was definitely a game changer. It streamlined our operations. It allowed us to scale up. And more importantly, it actually benefits the customer the most. So, hope you have very similar stories. If not, I really encourage you to challenge the status quo. That's it for today, and please remember to sign up so you don't miss out on all our future podcasts. Thank you.